President Bush, in this inaugural address and in his second term, can you make comparisons to Richard Nixon, won by a landslide, much more than Bush, in terms of how he beat his opponent, and yet ultimately is forced to resign?
Well, let us hope history repeats itself, and there's a possibility that the American people will get fed up with endless war and endless deaths coming out, American deaths. That's all we care about. We don't care about foreigners dying. But that is getting on people's nerves. I think that he thinks, and many of the American people appear to think, that we're in a movie. Lousy movie, but it's just a movie. And once the final credits run, all those dead people who are just extras anyway will stand up and come home or go back to the old actors' home. It isn't a movie we're in. It's real life. And these are real dead people. And there are more and more of them. And the world won't tolerate it. So he might very well end up like Mr. Nixon. Nixon, at least when he ran again, curiously enough, is rated among the most liberal and progressive of our presidents in the 20th century. Not that he really was, it's just that he felt domestic affairs were best left alone. Let labor unions and capital worry about that while the president prosecuted foreign wars. He loved foreign affairs because it was fun. You got to make a lot of trips and see people in fancy uniforms and hear Hail to the Chief in various tunes. That was Nixon's take. And then, of course, once he got into war, he couldn't get out, didn't try very hard to get out. He wanted to be victorious. Well, he wasn't victorious. Then he lied and cheated. This one lies and cheats, too. So far, he's not had his Watergate. Let us hope that there is one looming.
Do you take heart from the opposition, from the resistance on the ground, from the grassroots protests?
Well, you know, I spent 3 years in the Second World War in the Pacific, and I was born at West Point, and I have some affinity for the Army. And what I'm hearing, the tom-toms that are coming not only from those who have returned to the United States, particularly reservists, but what I also hear from overseas is that there's great distress and dislike of this government and certainly of this war, which is idly done. And everybody is at risk with insufficient arms, and no motivation at all except the vanity of the lowest grade of politicians that we've ever had in the White House. They are disturbed, and I can see that there may be suddenly something coming from them once they get back home. If they can get back home, they may turn things around.
And in general, young people in this country protesting the inauguration, for example, more than 10,000 people out in the streets, although there was almost no coverage except for Pacifica and independent media of those voices. People, hosts on CNN, saying they didn't want to over-exaggerate the images that would be so easy to go to, so they just didn't.
Or be honest about them. The famous February, a year or so ago, when everybody demonstrated, I spoke to 100,000 people in Hollywood Boulevard. And the LA Times, which is better than most of the establishment papers, said there's just hardly anybody there. However, they were undone by the photograph taken of when I was up on a platform at the very end of Hollywood Boulevard with La Brea in back of me, and way up ahead, Vine Street. You saw 100,000 people. You saw what they looked like. Unlike New York, where they got everybody into side streets, so you couldn't see them at all in a photograph because they just didn't show up. So out here, a makeup man at the Times helped the cause.
As the Democratic Party chooses a new leader, do you have words of advice for the direction?
Remember that the United States, the people of the country, have always been isolationists, a word which has been demonized. So now, an isolationist is somebody who believes in a flat earth. and is a racist and so forth and so on. Well, none of that is true. Isolationists were most of the left in the Second World War, from Norman Thomas on to Burton K. Wheeler, were progressive Americans. The very best liberal Americans were anti-war. We have never been for imperial foreign wars. We have to be dragged screaming into them, as we were after Pearl Harbor, and there was a lot of machinations going on to make sure that that happened. And it goes on all the time. Events are made so horrible. People like Saddam and so on are demonized. And we all have to immediately begin by saying how awful he is for 25 minutes before we can get down to the fact that he was no threat to the United States. No threat at all. He was not involved with Al-Qaeda. He was not involved with 9/11. He was not. He was not. You can say it a million times, but there you have a president with the help of the most corrupt media in my lifetime, booming his words across the land and telling lies about that we're 45 minutes away from being blown up by the weapons of mass destruction that this master of evil has in his hands. To which the answer is why? Why would he do that? There must be some motivation. You see, they are now beyond motivation, and that is insanity. So an insane government is not one that you can look to with any confidence.
Gore Vidal, speaking to us from California, his latest book, Imperial America, Reflections on the United States of Amnesia. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org. We'll be back in a minute.